So it's been about a week and a half or so since I did my first 2021 NBA mock draft, and now I'm starting to get myself caught up and starting to watch more of these prospects and start to at least get a little bit of a better feel for what I think about these guys. So figure it was time to come on here and do an updated mock. If it's your first time checking out one of my mocks, make sure you smash the subscribe button and follow me on Twitter. So like I said, over the past week-ish, I've started to watch more of the guys, especially the top-tier names, starting to get a better feel for what I like about their game, what I don't like about their game. I still have quite a bit of work to do, admittedly, but at least starting to get some early impressions. And I will say sometimes, there could be a point in time where, when it comes to watching these guys, similar to the NFL, at least for me, my first instinct, when I deviate from that, is when I start to get into trouble. Sometimes I'll get an impression of a guy, and then I'll start to convince myself of something one way or another. And usually, that hasn't worked so well. It's when I go for that first impression that I tend to stay truer and tend to be a little more accurate. And the thing I will say, certainly about the NBA and its draft, is it's an even larger crapshoot than the NFL. The NFL in and of itself is a crapshoot, yes, but typically with those guys, you've seen them play college ball for 3 to 4 years. They're coming into the league typically as 21, 22, or even 23-year-old men, where you got these kids are 1 year removed from high school. They may have played college basketball. They might have played in the G League, like a couple of the notable prospects in this draft with Green and Kuminga. You've got international players that are 18, 19 years of age, like Sengun and Garuba. Petrushev, Petrusev's a little older, but you get my point. Like with the NBA, it's a lot harder because there's way more projection than there even is with the NFL. So you're going to have some wild swings and some wild misses and some wild hits when it comes to some of these prospects. But based off of what I've looked at so far, you can look at my mock draft. All 30 picks from round 1 will be in the description box down below. As I look at it, early impressions. Pick 1, I've got Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State going to the Houston Rockets. Feels like Luka Light is kind of the early impression that I have. Feels like he's a guy, he's big. I don't think he's athletic enough to stay at the point guard position, but he could play more of a 2-3 type of role where he's a primary ball handler for your team and can be a big-time scorer. So if you're somebody that is wanting that Luka type of impact, you might be looking at somebody like Cade Cunningham. So I would not be surprised to see he ends up being the number 1 overall pick, even though I don't think his athletic upside is the highest of this class. No, it's not. But could certainly understand why a lot of people are hyped up on him. And for the Houston Rockets that badly need somebody that could develop into a franchise type of player, there are a few guys in this draft that can be. He certainly is one of them. And in general, I look at this year's draft and say this is the better year to have a pick in the top 5 or a pick in the top 10, because you could get some real difference makers, some real impact players, where last year felt like he had a couple of guys that differentiated themselves, and then it was a lot of the similar type of role player. Now, in this year's draft, I will grant you that it's loaded with wings, and as you get later on into round 1, you're going to see a big run, I would think, on point guards, but it's really heavy on 2s and 3s, and that matches, kind of what is the most important area in the modern NBA is you need those wings, you need those 2s, you need those 3s, and this draft is certainly loaded with them. And I say that to say, if you miss out on one guy at that position, chances are there's another guy up, next man up at either the 2 or the 3. It's not going to be that much of a departure. There are different guys that bring different skills and different fits to the table, but you got a lot of them that should have long, productive NBA careers. And now for the Detroit Pistons, I've seen a number of mocks that have Evan Mobley, the center from USC, going number 2. And I can't lie, Evan Mobley's athletic upside is incredibly impressive. It is tantalizing when you think about what he could be as a rim protector, as a shot blocker, as a difference maker defensively, even though I think he still needs some work in terms of his man-to-man and help and pick-and-roll defense. But that shot blocking upside is incredibly tantalizing. That said, it's the same thing I said a couple of years ago when it came to DeAndre Ayton versus Luka Doncic. 100 out of 100 times in the modern NBA, if you've got a wing that you grade out the same as the big man, you take the wing 100 out of 100 times. And I think Detroit would be foolish to take Evan Mobley second overall. It's just me. I'm looking at Jalen Green. You're talking about a high energy, high athletic upside wing player. Like, this is a guy that you could project being a big-time scorer in the league. Like, when I look at Cade Cunningham and I say Luka Doncic light, I look at Jalen Green and I say maybe a Donovan Mitchell light. You got Donovan Mitchell tearing up the playoffs right now. Like, whereas Evan Mobley, could have a long, very, very good NBA career as a big man, he's just not going to impact things as much as somebody like a Jalen Green can. Green's upside is much bigger, and it's much more aligned with the modern NBA. So I think you got to take a guy like him if you're Detroit at number 2. Doesn't mean it has to be him. It could be a Jalen Suggs. But either way, you got to take one of those guys. You got to take one of the Jalens. And then for Orlando at pick 3, they could go with Mobley to replace the traded away Vucevic. But if you think Jalen Suggs is the better player, you got to go with him. Like, this is a guy that you envision being NBA ready. Maybe you're looking at him as a Damian Lillard light type of guy. The point guard position is pretty important in today's league. I still think the wings are where it's most important. But you're looking at a guy that could facilitate, that could score, create his own shot, create shots for others. Like, Orlando certainly would be doing well for themselves if they got him as kind of their new building block, their new franchise player. OKC to get Mobley at 4 would be really, really nice for them. They've got needs everywhere, and they got a crap ton of draft picks over the next few years. So they just need to be in a position where they're just acquiring talent. And Mobley would be a really good pick for them. Honestly, out of the so-called top 5 guys, the one that's impressed me the least so far is Kuminga. Like, I got to watch him more. But my early impression, I have not been that impressed compared to some of those other guys. Maybe it's a thing of like the top 4, and then it's him, and then it's some of the other guys. That could be what it is. And as I watch more of this class, I'll start to get a better feel for things. But when I look at Kuminga, do I look at him and see some of the same tantalizing upside that I see out of the other 4 guys that I mentioned? No, I don't. Whereas I could say with a Davion Mitchell, he doesn't have the tantalizing upside because you're talking about an older prospect. And you might say, well, why would you have Golden State taking him? I think some people mock like Toronto taking him. But Golden State, to me, is a fantastic fit. Here's a guy that can serve as a secondary ball handler next to Steph Curry. Here's a guy that can hit some shots from the outside. And most importantly of all, he can play lockdown, elite-level perimeter defense on 1s and 2s. And you need that in the backcourt playing alongside Steph Curry. And if you're hoping to get Klay Thompson back into the fold, like, a guy like Davion Mitchell, I mean, for the Warriors, it's a little different. Last year, they gambled on the upside with James Wiseman. We'll see how that works out long term, see if they regret not taking LaMelo Ball. But here, you got a chance, like, yes, you want to draft for upside still if you're getting these marquee picks if you're Golden State. But you have a second first-round pick. That's probably something that I've got them taking Josh Giddey, the wing from Australia. That's where you could gamble there. But for this 6th pick, you want somebody that can come in and contribute right away because you're potentially thinking about trying to contend next year. Having a Steph still in the peak of his career. You still have Draymond. You're hoping that you get Klay back healthy after 2 years of being out. You want somebody to come in and contribute right away. You're probably looking at a guy like Davion Mitchell being a perfect fit there. Scottie Barnes is a wing that I really like because I see a guy that can defend the 1 through the 5 at the NBA level. I really do. Now, how much can he provide offensively? That is a great question. And you hate to sit there and start thinking that you're going to take a wing defensive stopper at this point in time in the draft, but that defensive versatility is special. And he's got high-end on-the-ball defense skills. He's got high-end instincts and awareness and communication as a defender. Whereas in the modern NBA, it's much more about offense, and I totally understand that. It is awesome to see a guy with such intriguing potential. To me, he's a better defensive prospect, a much better defensive prospect than Patrick Williams was last year coming out of Florida State. Difference is Patrick Williams had more offensive upside, I think, and was a better shooter. But if Barnes can do anything offensively, he could be a damn good player in this draft. But, it's like I said, as I go through this draft, man, you're talking about so many similar type of wing players. Some guys that can really light it up from the outside. You get those 3-and-D type of dudes. You see some of those dudes that are more dribble drive slasher, high athletic upside type of guys. Not just the Jalen Greens of the world, but the Keon Johnsons of the world. Whereas a Moses Moody might look at more of like a 3-and-D type of guy. You look at James Bouknight and you might say this is more of a pure perimeter big-time scorer in the league. Like lots of variety at the wing position in this draft. And I also look at the quality of this draft and I say, you know, that second half of the first round, you're going to get some pretty good players, go to some teams that could, you know, really benefit from their services. Like you're going to get a good combination of talent and fit. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see some guys taken in the second half of this first round this year that end up, you know, vastly outplaying in some cases their draft position. Because this is a good draft class. Certainly to me looks like it's better than last year's was. So I've still got Cunningham, like I said, going number 1. You guys let me know, is he the number 1 player in your opinion in this draft? If you were Detroit, who do you take? Do you take one of the Jalens or do you take Evan Mobley number 2? Who are some of the guys that you think are being slept on in this draft process? Who are some of the guys that you think are being highly overrated in this draft process? Let me know in the comments below. And again, remember, follow me on Twitter and smash that subscribe button. Take care.